The frost held the city as if it had its own bars. February 1938 cut across cheeks like needles, and from this ringing it seemed stone sang sharper than metal. She walked across the schoolyard where, not long ago, she had explained to ninth graders why Akhmatova's poems breathed shorter than Nekrasov's lines. Her name was Anna Petrovna. She was 24, and she had those eyes that show up even in bad photographs, as if someone had left a lamp burning inside them. That evening, that lamp would not help her. The knock at the door was polite. 2 men in nondescript coats, polite questions, polite, "Come with us." On the kitchen counter, a teapot cooled. In the hallway hung her husband's scarf. He was an architect, who would return later and not understand why the key turned in an empty apartment. The protocol was short as a whip: anti-Soviet agitation, Trotskyite sympathies, witness testimony. She tried to explain that she had read poetry to children, and poetry wasn't leaflets. The pale-faced man snapped his pocket watch shut, glanced at the dial, and gave the signal. The metal of the handcuffs was colder than the February air. On the stairwell, it smelled of cat urine and cabbage soup. For a moment, she thought she could still turn back if she called out to Zoya, the neighbor, but her voice stuck deep like a splinter. In Butyrka prison, the lamp burned day and night. The light gave no warmth, it only made the shadows sharper. The investigator, with his carefully trimmed nails, asked questions as if checking homework. Who did you associate with? Who brought the books? Why those particular poems? Anna answered, but at some point she began hearing her own voice from outside herself, as if someone had started a gramophone playing someone else's record. At night, the cell was crowded. The women lay on their sides, shoulder blades cutting into each other like books on an overcrowded shelf. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone had stopped crying long ago because all the tears were gone. By the 3rd day, she thought the lamp was humming on a single note, and from that hum, time was slowly rusting away. The transport came suddenly. A list, names, hastily tied bundles. They were led into the yard. The snow crunched so loudly it seemed to track every step. The Stolyopin prison car caught them like a clever hand catching a thrown ball. In the cramped compartment with metal grates, the air smelled of iron, sour wool, and others' fear. The women sat holding their knees to conserve warmth. In the corner, a young seamstress kept trying to smooth her hair, a habit that preserved what remained of her dignity. Anna looked at the frosted window, where they were reflected not as people, but as shadows. Behind the wall, in the next section, men cursed hoarsely. Someone coughed, as if pulling wire from his chest. The train traveled long. Day changed to night with no border, no return ticket. At one transfer point, a man in a leather jacket glanced through the window and paused. Anna didn't understand at first that this look wasn't questioning or official. It was appraising, like at a horse fair. She shuddered, but the word shame had no weight here. In the transit cell, an old woman with coal-black eyes whispered, "Pretty, are you? That's not a gift, girl. That's an article without a number." Anna didn't answer. She felt for herself, and felt for the first time how beauty, something she had never worked at because it simply happened, became a kind of mark, visible through felt boots and padded jackets, a mark you couldn't hide from. When the train finally gasped to a stop, they pushed them out into a white wasteland. The wind stripped the skin down to bone. Above the log barracks, like a trunk with black staples, hung smoke that warmed no one except those with the keys. On the watchtowers stood figures with rifles. They looked like toys until your gaze met another gaze in return. "Kolima," said a woman in a quilted jacket, as if naming an old enemy. At the gate, they asked Anna's surname, then looked not at the paper, but at her face. Strange eyes lingered a second too long. "Teacher? Yes. There's a library, there's a medical unit, there's the office." Each word sounded like a life preserver, but each word had a steel ring on its chest. She was assigned to the women's barracks, a long space where the air was thick with breath and damp rags, bunks in 3 tiers, a stove that frightened more than it warmed. Any spark was like an extra word during interrogation. The women glanced at each other quickly, briefly, like on a battlefield. No one wasted looks here. Anna climbed to the middle bunk, pressed her back against the wall to have some support behind her. The woman to her right, bony with a strong, determined chin, smiled a tired smile. "I'm Zina. Article, piece of bread. Your eyes." Anna didn't understand. Zina nodded towards the door. "Here, eyes are like a passport, only they don't shorten your sentence." The first day of logging was like a twisted fairy tale where the same actions repeat until the soul wears smooth. The axe was heavier than her body, the log heavier than the word freedom. Her fingers quickly became strangers. They didn't obey, they just ached together. The overseer, young with light ellish lashes, assigned quotas. Seeing how Anna lifted the axe, he held his gaze and twisted his mouth into the kind of smile you see at a fair when the merchandise turns out better than promised. Zina whispered, "Don't look in his eyes. Here, there's a line for glances." Anna lowered her lashes like a curtain. The wind rocked the forest like a bell. That evening, a brittle silence entered the barracks. 2 people brought it with them, a guard with a list and a thin woman in a clean headscarf, the camp commandant's secretary, Comrade Prokofyeva. The guard introduced her. Prokofyeva introduced herself to no one personally. She read names, and each word seemed to pull a fate along like thread. To the office, such and such. To the library, such and such. To the medical unit, such and such. The words sounded like rewards, like demotions, like sentences. When Anna was called, the barracks exhaled a light, poorly hidden sigh. Anna felt dozens of stares stick to her face, not from envy, but from knowledge. Zina didn't look at her. She was carefully darning a sleeve and said evenly, like a diagnosis, "That's not work. That's a road to where it's warm and colder than outside." The office smelled of paper and kerosene. The window glass was clean, almost transparent, a rarity in these parts. Behind the desk sat a tall man in a greatcoat without insignia. He looked up at Anna and didn't smile. His gaze was neither kind nor cruel. It was proprietary. "Education? Higher. Pedagogical. Can you type?" "Yes." "Write neatly?" "I try." He nodded towards a desk with a typewriter. "Try." Anna sat down. Her fingers found the familiar rhythm, and even lines appeared on the paper. The metal clicked like a small heart, not trying to reveal itself. When she finished, the man tapped his fingers on the desk like coffin lids. "Will you work here?" He paused. "A room near headquarters, food ration at free employee level. In exchange, discipline and understanding of the rules." The word room struck her head like hot steam. Near headquarters sounded soft, almost cozy, and therefore threatening. In the next room, someone coughed, a door creaked, and for a second, the smell of fried meat slipped through the crack, a ghost of a city that no longer existed. The man in the greatcoat stood up.
Come, have a look.
On the way out, Anna met Prokofieva's gaze, that same headscarf, neat as a scar. Prokofieva nodded lightly, almost woman to woman, and whispered so the wind would carry the words away. Better here. Anna didn't ask better than what. The answer lay all around. The room was small, a bed, a table, a stool, a washstand. On the nightstand, a tin with tea dust and a piece of sugar and paper, like a rare coin. The lock on the door was new. The window faced the yard where people in padded jackets walked, and the tower where a man with a rifle stood. Below the window, a woman in an old coat held a bowl and stared at the kitchen door. Her gaze was fixed, like a dog on a chain. The room was warm. Warmth smelled like a promise and a chain. That evening, when the camp darkness lit its sparse lights, someone knocked. At the door stood the same tall man, now without his greatcoat. His shirt was white as snow seen from the window of a warm house. "Settling in?" he asked. "Yes. I need reports by morning, and quiet." He put a folder on the table, looked at her hands, not her face, not her eyes, but her fingers. "Take care of them, they're camp property now." He smiled without smiling and left, leaving in the air a light scent of tobacco and power. Anna sat on the edge of the bed as if on the edge of thin ice. Behind the wall, someone whispered, someone laughed, someone talked in sleep. The watchtower looked in the window like a mirror. She wrapped her arms around herself and understood a simple thing. In this world, beauty was neither gift nor joy. It was a reason for lists. It was a reason for a door with a new lock. It was a knot the system pulled until the soul's clothing tore at the seams. Tomorrow she would go for hot water, learn where in the canteen they served their own, memorize the names of those who didn't look you in the eye but knew everything. Tomorrow in the barracks someone would say, "Lucky," and no one would guess that sometimes the word lucky sounded like a sentence. Night in the camp hummed differently than in the city. Here even silence was under surveillance. Somewhere far off a wolf howled. Closer a door slammed like a shot without a bullet. Anna lay down and didn't close her eyes. The lamp that had once been left burning in them shone steadily, but now this light didn't warm, it illuminated, and everything illuminated was visible to those with lists. On the table lay the typewriter, a black beetle with silver antenna. Tomorrow it would become her voice, today her silence. And somewhere very close another lock clicked, a mine door, inside. At dawn the camp groaned with the whistle, long drawn out like a human cry. The women arose as one organism, pulling on padded jackets, wrapping their feet in rags instead of footcloths. The smell of smoke and cheap gruel crawled along the corridor, mixing with the breath of hundreds of bodies. Anna stood by the door, looking out the window at the gray fog that rose from each prisoner's mouth. The world outside was colorless, only white and gray, the colors of the camp, the colors of death. The barracks hummed with a quiet female hum, like a hive where each bee knows its place and has no right to fly. Some were silent, others tried to whisper. Someone knitted mittens from old rags, useless but familiar. In the corner sat an old woman with hair gray as ash. Her name was Varvara, but everyone called her Grandma Varya. She was sewing. She made thread from unraveled socks and a needle from a piece of wire. "We live, so we sew," she repeated, and it sounded like a prayer. Anna sat down beside her. Varvara didn't look up. "Are you new, from the warm ones?" she asked. "From the office," Anna answered quietly. "Ah, so now you're one of those who don't get beaten, only have their souls torn." Anna didn't know what to say. Varvara worked a knot with her finger. "Remember, girl, here everything divides into two kinds. Some labor until their skin falls off, others live in warmth and carry others' sins." The door opened. Prokofieva stood there, that same clean headscarf. Her voice was firm, but without anger. "Number 62, she called. "To the kitchen."
A woman arose like an automaton. 17 to the medical unit. Next, 217. That was Anna. Summons to headquarters. Stares like sharp needles pierced her back. There was no envy in them, only tired knowledge. Anna went out, feeling those stares follow her until the door slammed. Outside, the frost constricted her lungs. The air seemed made of glass. On the way to headquarters, she noticed tracks laid out in the snow, narrow, straight, like seams. By the gate stood a young guard with gray eyes, and that youth on his face looked more frightening than any brutality. He didn't look at her, only said shortly, "Wait." She waited. From headquarters came the sound of a typewriter, footsteps, men's voices. Then the door opened and Prokofyeva came out with a tired face and new names in her hands. "Go in," she said, nodding at the door, "and remember, here every word is like blood. If it's spilled, you can't gather it back." In the office sat the same man in the greatcoat, but without his tunic. Papers lay neatly arranged. He didn't look at her. "Sit down." His voice was calm, tired. "You're assigned to handle records for the 3rd Division." He paused. "Many cases, women in the barracks." Another pause. "Different kinds. Some forget their prisoners, some remember too sharply. You'll record who complains, who's silent, who cries." Anna was confused. But why? "Because of order." He looked directly at her. "We need to know who cries here." He smiled for the first time. "Crying is weakness, and weakness is contagious. You don't want the camp to get sick, do you?" Anna nodded. Inside her chest, everything tightened like cracked ice. Her new place was near the door. She sat at a desk that smelled of paper, kerosene, and leather. Sometimes officers passed by. One of them let his gaze linger. His look touched her skin like cold. That evening, when she returned to the barracks, the women moved aside, making room, but no one spoke. Only Varvara whispered, "If he calls you, don't go alone, never go alone." Anna didn't understand. Who? The master. Varvara crossed herself. "He has eyes without light. If he calls you, it means he has chosen." At night in the barracks there was whispering. Someone cried quietly under a blanket. Someone groaned in sleep. Outside the wind howled, reaching along the barbed wire like fingers on a string. Behind the wall in the office, a light still burned, and Anna knew that tomorrow this light would become her sun, cold, artificial, without warmth. She fell asleep to the crackle of the stove, but in her head echoed Varvara's voice, "Don't go alone." That night she dreamed of home, a Moscow courtyard, a book on the table, a teapot with a chipped spout. But when she opened her eyes, instead of a lamp above the bed, hung an empty bulb without light, and someone was already standing in the doorway. "Number 217, to the chief, now."
She rose barefoot, feeling neither fear nor cold, only the sound of footsteps ringing from the floorboards like nails being hammered into a coffin lid. Mornings in the camp began the same, but for Anna this morning was different. Yesterday's words, "to the chief now," were stuck in her head like a nail. She followed the guard, feeling the ground reject her steps. All around lay the same white, silent Kolyma, where snow was not just cold, but a form of punishment. It lay on everything, even hearts. The headquarters building stood slightly apart from the barracks, a stone house, old, with faded walls, and tiny windows that always emitted warm steam. A dim lantern hung by the door. It burned even during the day, as if symbolizing that in this place there was no morning, only eternal twilight. The guard opened the door and nodded her inside. "Go in." Inside it smelled different. Paper, tobacco, wet sheepskin, food, warm smells, but they didn't make you warmer. Behind a desk, looking at a camp map, stood the same man in the greatcoat without insignia. This time he wore a shirt and heavy boots that made the floor tremble slightly. He looked up. His gaze was cold as iron in frost. "Sit down," he said. not specifying where. Anna sat on the edge of a chair. The papers before him were covered in dense, uneven lines. He picked one up, glanced at it, then suddenly asked, "How long have you been in Cam?" "Second month." "Getting used to it?" "I don't know." "You do know," he cut off calmly. "Everyone gets used to it, only some with their bodies, some with their shadows." He slowly lit a cigarette, shook out the match, looked at her hands. "You write neatly. Such people are needed. You'll type reports on special contingent, numbers, movements, discipline, sometimes complaints. All complaints bring to me personally." Anna nodded. He paused. "And also," he added quietly, "sometimes there are meetings here. A woman in camp must know how to conduct herself. You do know how, don't you?" The question sounded like a sentence wrapped in politeness. She nodded again. "And live at headquarters. Your room is next door." He stood, walked to the door, and opened the next one. A small room, bed, table, washstand, and that same clean window through which searchlights gleamed white. He nodded at the bed. "Rest. Tomorrow there will be much work." When he left, silence fell like a thick blanket. Anna sat on the edge of the bed, looked out the window. Outside, a woman in a padded jacket carried a bucket. Soldiers passed by. Everything was calm, ordinary, and that ordinariness was the most terrible thing. In this world, even violence had the shape of order. At night, she didn't sleep. In the corridor, footsteps, muffled voices. Every few hours, someone passed by, opened the door to the next room, then closed it, and footsteps retreated. Sometimes she heard the rustle of peepers, sometimes the jingle of keys. Silence here was alive. It breathed and listened. By morning, the door swung open. Prokofieva stood there with papers in her hands. "Get dressed, the chief is waiting." Her voice had no intonation, like someone who had long ceased distinguishing good from evil. Anna got up, dressed. Prokofieva led her to the office. A teapot already stood there, saucers with sugar cubes on the table. The chief was writing something, not looking at her. "Drink," he said, pointing to the tea. Anna took a glass. Her hands trembled. "You'll have to work a lot. Everyone here works. Some with their bodies, some with their heads. You with your head." He looked at her, and in that look there was no desire, but something worse, cold possession, not as toward a woman, but as toward an object that belonged. "Do as you're told and don't ask questions. That'll help you live longer than the others." These words were said without threat, simply as a rule of life, like wearing felt boots in winter. Days merged into one. She typed reports, sorted papers, recorded names. Sometimes they brought lists of the dead. She stamped them without reading. Sometimes cards for women transferred by special order. Everyone knew what that meant. No one spoke of it. Prokofieva began coming more often. She was silent, handed over papers, sometimes poured tea. Their conversations were short, but once, when the chief had gone to the zone, Prokofieva lingered. "Your face is still alive," she said quietly. "Don't show it to anyone. Hide it while you can." "What do you mean?" "Hide it," Prokofieva repeated. "In these walls, a beautiful face is a target." Anna looked at her. In Prokofieva's eyes there was no pity, but only weariness. She understood. The woman wasn't speaking from kindness, but from experience. That evening, a group of prisoners arrived from a neighboring mine. They were lined up along the wall, dirty, frostbitten, half dead. Among them were women. Anna sat in the corner with papers and heard the officers discussing their fates. These to the kitchen, these to the sewing shop, and this one pointed to a young girl of about 18 with bruises under her eyes, to Petrovich in supply service. "She'll do." No one objected. The decision was pronounced calmly, matter-of-factly, like distributing coal. The girl stood silently, her eyes staring into emptiness. In that moment, Anna understood that here everything was done not from desire, but from habit. Violence had become technology.
The next day, Anna walked down the corridor with folders. The doors she passed were closed, but from some came strange sounds, not screams, but short gasps, as if someone was suffocating. Once a door opened slightly, and she saw for a second a woman sitting on a chair, with empty eyes and bruises on her face. Someone closed the door. Anna kept walking. Her footsteps echoed in her temples. That evening, when the chief returned, he was in a good mood. "Lists for review ready?" "Yes, Comrade Chief." "Good." He took the sheets, flipped through them, then looked up. "Do you know why you were kept in headquarters, Anna?" She was silent. "Because you know how to be silent. Silence is a rare talent. Preserve it." He stood, walked to the window, looked at the searchlights, and added, "And also because people like you are needed so the rest don't forget who's in charge here." He said this calmly, almost lazily, as if speaking not of people, but of a mechanism. That night, Anna understood for the first time that her new life was not a life, but a position of power. She was not a person, but part of the decoration of power. From the barracks, a distant hum came. Someone cried. Someone sang an old song, barely audible. The sound mixed with the wind, and in that sound was everything: longing, memory, hopelessness. She sat at the typewriter, placed a clean sheet. Words flowed automatically in even lines. State of discipline satisfactory. Workforce 642 persons. Losses in 24 hours 3. No complaints. Each letter sounded like a lie, and this lie was becoming the new truth of the camp. Her fingers moved as if they belonged to someone else. When she finished, she placed the sheet on the edge of the table. Suddenly the door opened slightly, quietly, slowly. Prokofyeva stood on the threshold. "Go to sleep," she said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Anna nodded. "Is Varvara from the women's barracks alive?" Prokofyeva sighed. "For now. She's been transferred to logging. Don't look there. Don't remember. Here, memory is more dangerous than a knife."
She left. The door closed. Anna lay down. Outside in the darkness, the hum of searchlights again. She understood that now she lived in a world where the word woman had ceased to mean person. Here it was a designation of function. The camp processed even feelings. In the silence, she remembered Varvara's words: "Some labor, others carry others' sins." Now she knew what that meant. Her work wasn't paper. Her work was silence, so that no one would hear another's cry. Toward morning, when the searchlights went out, she went to the window. Outside lay snow, pink from the dawn. Women went to work, bending under the weight of tools. Among them walked that same young girl who had been assigned yesterday. Her face was empty as a clean sheet of paper. Anna turned away. On the table lay a new folder, special accounts. She knew it contained cards of living people who had weeks or days left. She sat down, opened the first page, took a pen. Her hand trembled. And suddenly she remembered. Once she had written poetry with students, words about spring, about sky, about love. Now she wrote reports about death. The world narrowed to paper, and only somewhere deep in her soul a tiny corner still glowed, where poetry still sounded, not as words, but as memory of what it meant to be human. She straightened up, sighed, signed her name. Behind the door, footsteps again. The chief walked down the corridor. Anna put down the pen, folded her hands. Now she knew. The next name on the list could be her own. Spring in Kolyma looked just like winter, only the snow was dirtier. Roads turned to mud. Barracks smelled of dampness, iron, and rotten bread. The air in headquarters was heavier than in the punishment cell, not from stench, but from the words spoken there. Papers continued multiplying like cells in a diseased body. Anna typed lists, reports, orders. Her fingers moved quickly, but her mind lagged behind. She no longer felt time. In camp, it flowed differently, without days and nights, only with intervals between commands. Sometimes when she finished work and lifted her hands from the typewriter keys, she thought she heard the sound of her own thoughts, like an echo in an empty corridor. That evening, the chief of staff called a meeting. The office smelled of kerosene and tobacco. 3 men and Prokofyeva, with her folders, sat at the long table. They talked about quotas, coal shortages, escapes. The words fell dryly, like sand through a sieve. No one said the word person. Anna stood by the wall, taking notes. "Any complaints?" asked one officer. "No," answered the chief. "Whoever complains quickly ceases to exist." No one laughed. No one even looked up. That's how jokes were told here, without a smile, without sound. When the meeting ended, Prokofyeva detained Anna. "Tomorrow you're going to the zone," she said. "Check the records at the logging brigade." "Why me?" "Necessary. You're reliable now." The word reliable sounded like a diagnosis. In the morning she walked with an escort along the road to the clearing. Wind whistled between the trees. It smelled of resin and smoke. Near the camp fence, where barbed wire tangled with rusty nails, she saw women, emaciated, wrapped in rags, hands covered with sores. They drank melted water from a barrel, not raising their eyes. One, seeing Anna, straightened up and said quietly, "You're from the office? Write us down, at least somehow." The guard shouted, "Quiet!" Anna looked away, but the words stuck to her memory like a splinter. "Write us down, at least somehow." In the logging brigade barracks, she was given the reports, written messily, figures blurred. The logging leader, a gray-haired man with darkened hands, looked at her warily. "How many died this week?" "5. The report says 3. That's what they wrote. He raised his eyes. In them there was something that didn't exist in the camp: shame. "Write as ordered," he said, "and leave the truth for yourself. It won't help anyway." On the way back, Anna walked slowly. Behind her stretched a road of mud. Her boot prints filled with melting snow. She realized that for the first time in a long while she could smell things: resin, smoke, human sweat, wet wood. These smells were more real than paper. That evening, back in her room, she didn't turn on the lamp. She sat by the window. In the yard, women returned from work, one after another, like shadows. Someone fell. Someone helped them up. Above the towers, searchlights hummed. And suddenly it seemed that the camp was a huge organism, and the people in it were blood it pumped through its veins. Only this blood had no heart. She opened the desk drawer, took out one of the old lists, the one she had signed yesterday. Dozens of names, check marks beside them, transferred, died, missing, in even, neat lines. The paper smelled of ink, and in that smell there was more pain than in the screams she hadn't heard. The next morning, a telegram arrived at headquarters. A prisoner had died in the zone, suspicion of attempted escape. The chief ordered the documents processed. "Do it quickly," he said. "No one needs work delayed because of one person." She wrote, "Shot while attempting escape." Her hand trembled. The pen left a blot like a drop of blood. That evening she couldn't sleep. In her head echoed the phrase the woman at the clearing had said, "Write us down, at least somehow." And she began to write. On the backs of unnecessary reports, in tiny handwriting so no one would find it, names, dates, descriptions, everything she remembered. Varya, hands burned but sings during breaks. Lida from Leningrad, couldn't dare interrogation, silent. Katya, sewed mittens, disappeared after summons to headquarters.
She didn't know why she was writing. She simply couldn't not write. Paper was becoming her only witness. Rumors spread through the camp. Someone had tried to kill herself. Someone had disappeared. Prokofyeva came, silent, tired. "The authorities are nervous," she said. "They're watching things in Moscow. There might be an inspection. Stay in the shadows." Anna nodded. But that evening, when the chief returned, he was unusually irritated. "Too much talk," he said. "Someone is writing. Someone is whispering. We'll find out, and it will be bad for everyone." He passed by without looking at her, but she felt the cold at her back. The next day, Prokofyeva brought her a new stack of documents. "These are records of the dead. Recopy them neatly." She hesitated. "If you want, keep a copy for yourself, for memory. Just don't show anyone." Anna was surprised. "Why would I need that?" "When you leave here, you'll have something to remember, so you don't think it was all a dream." Anna took the papers. That evening, alone, she chose a clean sheet and carefully wrote, "If anyone ever reads this, let them know we were here. We are not ghosts. We had names, hands, voices. We lived." She straightened up, sighed, and signed her name. Behind the door, footsteps again. The chief walked down the corridor. Anna put down the pen, folded her hands. Now she knew the next name on the list could be her own. Spring in Kolyma looked just like winter, only the snow was dirtier. Roads turned to mud. Barracks smelled of dampness, iron, and rotten bread. The air in headquarters was heavier than in the punishment cell, not from stench, but from the words spoken there. Papers continued multiplying like cells in a diseased body. Anna typed lists, reports, orders. Her fingers moved quickly, but her mind lagged behind. She no longer felt time. In camp, it flowed differently, without days and nights, only with intervals between commands. Sometimes, when she finished work and lifted her hands from the typewriter keys, she thought she heard the sound of her own thoughts, like an echo in an empty corridor. That evening, the chief of staff called a meeting. The office smelled of kerosene and tobacco. 3 men and Prokofyeva, with her folders, sat at the long table. They talked about quotas, coal shortages, escapes. The words fell dryly, like sand through a sieve. No one said the word person. Anna stood by the wall, taking notes. "Any complaints?" asked one officer. "No," answered the chief. "Whoever complains quickly ceases to exist." No one laughed. No one even looked up. That's how jokes were told here, without a smile, without sound. When the meeting ended, Prokofyeva detained Anna. "Tomorrow..."
In June, there was a search at night. First in the women's barracks, then in her room. 2 soldiers turned over her things, lifted the mattress, pried up floorboards. They didn't find the papers. The notebook was hidden inside an empty folder among dozens of identical ones. When they left, Anna stood in the silence, feeling everything inside her ringing. The next morning, Prokofyeva didn't come. They said she'd been sent on a business trip. A dull anxiety settled over headquarters. The chief looked tired, his eyes red. He summoned Anna. "Did anyone visit you yesterday?" "No, Comrade Chief." "Are you sure?" "Yes." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "If you find out anything, report it. We don't have room for writers here." She nodded. In that moment, she realized for the first time, if he discovered the truth, she would disappear, just like those whose cards she had signed. A week passed. The anxiety subsided, but something in the camp had changed. The women began looking at Anna differently, not as someone from the office, but as someone who wrote. Rumors traveled quietly, without words, but they traveled. Once Varvara approached her, returned from the clearing,
thinner, grayer, but alive. "I heard you're writing something down," she whispered. "Don't be afraid. Write. If not us, who?" Anna nodded, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose, however small, but her own. That night, the camp again sank into silence. In the distance, generators hummed. Somewhere a beam fell, a chain clanked. Anna sat at the table, writing. Today, Varvara died. Her heart sang to the end. She put down the pen, closed the notebook. Outside the window, dawn crept in, gray as ash. For a second, she thought she heard someone calling her name. Perhaps the wind? Perhaps conscience? Summer in these parts wasn't a season, but a climactic mistake. The mud dried, insects descended on the camp like thoughts on a sleepless person. The wind grew warmer but heavier. Anna worked quickly and silently. Her fingers remembered the typewriter's rhythm better than her heart remembered the rhythm of her own life. Reports piled up like firewood before winter. Among the official papers lay that thin, almost weightless notebook, her secret archive. At night she wrote in it, names, descriptions, short phrases, like a gravedigger's tags. One morning, a new man entered headquarters, short, wiry, with short red mustache and an empty gaze that seemed to see only objects. He was introduced briefly, Operative Savelyev. Silently, he walked around the room, touched the edges of desks, ran his finger along the glass, looked into cabinets. Movements like a locksmith checking for weak spots, for squeaks. At Anna's desk, he paused, pressed the typewriter lid with his finger. The metal clicked softly. On the shelf above her desk, among neatly arranged folders, lay that thin, almost weightless notebook, her secret archive. He ran his finger along the spines, didn't pull any out, nodded, and left. The ice inside Anna cracked but didn't break, until after lunch he returned, sat across from her, placed his palms on the table, small, with short nails, clean as a man who dealt with dirt all day but kept his hands in his pockets. "Your surname is Anikieva, born 1924. Before arrest, school, literature. You like order," he said without raising his eyes. "You have a gift for it." The words flowed calmly, evenly. He looked up. "Look." He unfolded a thin sheet. Her handwriting, small, legible, stared at her like a mirror. Lida, Leningrad, Varvara, sings. Katya disappeared. Her heart struck once and fell like a stone into a well. "Where are the rest?" Savelyev asked quietly. Anna silenced. "I can speak loudly, but I don't want to. I don't like loud things. They lead to cases. Cases love silence. Where is the notebook?" Her lips wouldn't obey. She heard her own voice from outside. "I don't know." He interlaced his fingers, rested his chin on the bridge of his hands. "You do know. Let's try differently. Who did you write down there?" Outside the window, someone fell, a dull thud. Footsteps passed beyond the door. Life continued, shamelessly, as always, when someone's head is being pushed into the ground. "No one," Anna said. "You're lying." He didn't sound angry. The word came out almost gently. He rose, walked along the cabinets, stopped at the window, looked at the tower, the wire, the gray sky. "I love order, paper order, human order, any kind, because without it, life unravels like a rotten rag. You're the same. You're useful. Why do you need extra sheets?" He turned. "Who asked you to write?" Inside Anna, as if an answer to a command, a long-ago whisper rose. "Write us down, at least somehow." She wanted to cover her ears. She shook her head. No one. So yourself, Savelyev nodded, not hiding a slight satisfaction. Yourself worse. Yourself means thought. Thought is contagion. Camps get sick of it. He came closer. Where is the notebook? She heard her own breathing, dry as rustling paper. The notebook lay there, in the old journal cover, within reach of his hand, and yet unreachable. If I look now, I'll find it, he said, as if reading her thoughts. If I don't find it now, I'll look tomorrow, the day after, until I find it, and then I'll find more than a notebook. Do you understand? She nodded. She understood. He smiled with the corner of his mouth like a man who always finishes his work. I'll give you